everybody, and welcome to the music rating, ranking, and reviewing podcast that we like to call Music Meltdown, in which we rate, rank, and review an artist's discography, songs, really whatever musical topic comes to mind, maybe even non-musical stuff in the future, and just sort of give opinions, ratings, and whatnot. Today we're going to the 70s, talking about a glam rock band, although they didn't start as a glam rock band. Talking about the 7 studio records of the band Mott the Hoople. Arguably a very forgotten band aside from their big song that was not even written by the band. So that's interesting. In the general sphere that I come from and from Mr. Lotta above me that we come from, though, they're a pretty well-regarded group with a lot of people loving them and others just kind of liking them, but at least they know them, which is more than you can say about most. My familiarity going to this is very strong. I've heard all of these records, I want to say at least 3, maybe 4 times. I love this discography. This is one of my favorite bands that I've covered so far as a whole, and I will not be shy about that in my rankings. However, I will admit this is another one of my more contentious lists, I will say. At the very least, at the top and maybe at the bottom, I have some peculiar picks. But I mean, I love all these records. I think that they're all very strong, but it really is just a matter of personal taste for this, I feel. I got Rich here. No real reason why. I just felt like having him on. Any thoughts about Mott the Hoople going into this?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on again, Adrienne. It's good to see you again. Good to be back. Um, I knew the name Mott the Hoople since I was a kid, but I never heard them at all, except once in a while I'd hear all the young dudes out in the wild. But I hadn't heard them at all until I did the ranking, the deep dive with Taste Like Music back when there were listography. And I loved it. I mean, I proclaimed in my little comment that I was now a fan. Um, hadn't gone back to them since. Just that's just kind of the my weird listening habits these days. Following the Taste Like Music guys. Doing album rankings for different artists, and I. It's kind of hard to go back, but I did go back for this video, and quite enjoyed the experience. So this is probably going to be some kind of love fest, I think.
We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Worst comes to worst, I mean, I can throw in some moments. I can throw in something. I'm good for that. Normally I'm in order. You want heads or tails?
Okay. I'll take heads.
I fell onto the floor. We got tails, so I guess I'll kick this off.
Okay.
Let's cut to the chase. Nobody's gonna like this. My bomb is all the undos, and here's the thing: this is the record that people know Mott the Hoople by, and that is a massive disappointment because to me it's their weakest. Um, Probably the most talked about issue, even for people that do love this record, is the production. David Bowie isn't a bad producer per se, but I feel like this record just doesn't have a ton of character in that regard. It's decent, but it lacks a lot of style that would come in the later Mott records. And this kind of feels like a bit of an awkward tuning into the glam style from the earlier, almost folk rock that they were doing, with some hard rock attributes. But enough with the negatives. Let's get into the positives because I got plenty of those. I love their cover of Sweet Jane. I think it's a really fun take on the song. And I now knowing the Velvet Underground version, I can comfortably say that I prefer this one by a fair bit. The title track is an utter classic, originally thought to be a sequel to David Bowie's 5 Years, but for me, it's even better. And I absolutely love the closer Sea Dive. I think it's a really interesting way to close it and is really different from everything else on the record, but blends it together well. Mama's Little Jewel is excellent, and Jerkin Crocus is a fun rocker. And the main track that sort of took me back on this listen was Soft Ground. Just really, really strong. However, there is some negatives here, which do leave it at the bottom. Sucker might be my least favorite song by Mott in general. I just don't really get much of an appeal from it. And Ready for Love just straight up blows. It's too long and very obviously would later become a Bad Company song. And it still sounds like a Bad Company song, just with a better singer. Despite the smaller flaws, there's a lot of great energy and there is some killer material across this. I just feel like they would later perfect the glam rock style that they're working with on this record. Despite that, I still have it at 4 stars. I think it's a very good album, but it's just simply not one of their better efforts for me. And I find it a bit upsetting that this is the record that they're sort of known for, when simply put, I think it's their weakest. I actually, before doing this, I had it at 3.5 and I had it even lower. But just today, I listened to it again and it shot up to a 4 for me. But still, they don't have a bad record. It's just I think that that's their weakest. So
Okay, well, I feel a little bit easier about my ranking. That might be a more radical take than anything I've got. Um, I fully expected you to have what I have at the bottom, what I think most people have. Mott the Hoople, the debut from 1969. Um, this is a good album, but there's some really significant reasons why it's at the bottom. Opening the album with an instrumental version of You Really Got Me by the Kinks doesn't help, although it is well played. Um, but I'm kind of like, why would you even listen to this instrumental version when the original just kicks major ass? And I don't know. It's a very bizarre choice for an opening track. But the main problem with this album is that the next 3 songs are painfully derivative of Bob Dylan, to the point where singer Ian Hunter borrows part of the vocal melody of The Times They Are Changing for Backsliding Fearlessly. Um, Hunter really sounds like he's trying to sound like Bob Dylan here. Um, there are some good songs here, though, particularly Rock and Roll Queen, which is sort of a taste of the glam that was to come. And I think the 10-minute Half Moon Bay is pretty darn cool as well. The song Laugh at Me was surprisingly written by Sonny Bono, and it's very good. The band rocks out for over 6 minutes on that one. Pretty, pretty enjoyable stuff. Interestingly, the opening riff on Rock and Roll Queen sounds similar to the opening bass line of the Stones' Live With Me. They both came out in 1969, so I don't know who influenced who or if it was just a coincidence or what. I love how many of their albums have a final track that was designed to be a grand finale, usually not long enough to be a normal song. That's the case with this album's Wrath and Roll. No vocals, just a rockin' climax. So there's some good stuff here. I would even say great in the case of Rock and Roll Queen, but parts of it are so derivative of Bob Dylan, I just can't go higher than 3.5 stars.
but to be fair, if you're going to be derivative of anybody, I think Dylan is one of the key people you could pick in that regard. But yeah, let's be honest. Ian Hunter, I love him. He's one of my favorite frontmen in general. I think he's an incredible singer. He really wants to be Bob Dylan most of the time, and that's not a bad thing. I would want to be Bob Dylan, but just yeah, interesting to note, and especially something interesting. Mott weren't really much a thing past 73, 74, but on Bob Dylan's classic 74 record, Blood on the Tracks, he sounds exactly like Ian Hunter. And I know that Ian Hunter borrowed a lot from Dylan, but like they sound so similar to me on that record. That's crazy. But anyways, my number 6, breaking out from my lunacy, I have the debut, Not the Hoople. A very different style of record from what would later be the Mott the Hoople sound. Ian Hunter, as we've mentioned, is incredibly inspired by Dylan, and it really shows. His voice is very similar to Dylan's across this record, and it's not a bad thing at all. All his bravado and just the style, even his infancy as a musician. And I find this album to be very good musically. It's not quite as tight or refined as they would get, but it's still just excellent. I love the keys especially. McRalph's an incredibly underrated guitarist. If all that you know him for is Bad Company, you are sorely mistaken because they suck and Mott are great. With that being said, though, I find the drumming to be almost perfect across this record as well. And you probably do need to point out that it starts with an instrumental cover of The Kinks' You Really Got Me, which I don't know why you'd ever listen to the Kinks version of You Really Got Me because the Van Halen version is at least 10 times better. But, anyways, past that, it has some amazing songs at the start. I love At the Crossroads, Laugh at Me is excellent, and same with Backsliding Fearlessly. I mean, sure, they took the melody from the times they are changing. One of the greatest songs ever made. So, I mean, I don't fault them too much for that either. Um, and I find them all just to be incredibly strong highlights of the early Mott sound, which is, if you haven't sort of noted from what we said, it's very different from the later glam stuff, almost folky at points, really bluesy as well, having a much heavier edge, and it's really unique. It's very interesting, and it's just not what you would expect from them. David Bowie really whipped them into shape on those later records. But my biggest issue here just comes down to some of the pointless extended jams and the interludes that are found without the record. And I really don't get what you're saying about Rock and Roll Queen. I think that song's just sort of all right. But the highlights here are good enough for me to have this at 4 stars as well. I think it's very good, but just not quite to the highs of some of their other records. So number 6, Mutt the Hoople, 4 stars.
Yeah, I thought Rock and Roll Queen was just good the previous time around, but it jumped up for me when I listened to it. Um, so anyway, my number 6. This will come as a shock to some. I've got Mott from 1973. I figured you might react that way. Um, I am up to 4 stars on this. I thought it might go higher on this re-listen, and I did like it more, but it's still at 4 stars. There's nothing bad on this. In fact, there are no bad Mott the Hoople songs. Um, None that I've heard anyway. The lowest I go on Mott the Hoople songs is 3 stars. So the first 3 tracks on Mott are excellent. All the way from Memphis is a strong opening rocker with some really wild sax from Andy McKay of Roxy Music. Whiz Kid has a killer guitar sound and some tasty riffs. There's some cool synth in there too, something you don't hear too often from Mott. Then we get Hymn for the Dudes, which is an interesting slow glam rocker. I'm not sure exactly what it's trying to say, but apparently it was a response to the backlash they got from certain quarters for jumping on the glam bandwagon. It's cool when he sings, "You ain't the Naz, you're just a buzz," some kind of temporary. Then the guitar, then the guitar solo kicks in, and the song takes flight. And this is a very glammy album, especially with the piano and the background vocals. There's some theatricality here. Violence is also excellent. It takes part of the Brain Capers song, The Journey, and builds from there. It's a really cool rocker with some weird violin. The rest of the tracks aren't quite as good as the ones I mentioned, and Ian Hunter is back to sounding like Dylan again on Ballad of Mott the Hoople and I Wish I Was Your Mother. Um, the latter being one of my least favorite. Couple of these songs I gave a 3.5 rating to. I know how highly regarded this album is, and I do wish I could go higher with it, but I can't honestly place it any higher than 4 stars.
Yeah, you're a lunatic. But anyways, uh, next up I have Wildlife. This is an interesting record. I kind of find it to be a bit misleading, from the album art and the title itself. It's really not as sort of rootsy or folky as you would kind of anticipate from something like that. Despite that, it's just a really killer collection of Mott songs. Whiskey Woman's great. Angel of Eighth Avenue is awesome. I love Wrong Side of the River. Waterloo's really good. Lay Down is one of my favorite covers just in general. I think that they do that song incredibly. And Home is Where I Want to Be is also very good. And this one might actually be one of Mick Ralph's better guitar showcases for me. This could very easily be pointed out in the final song, Keep a Knockin', where he is just shredding all over through these classic songs with amazing key work from Ian Hunter and Vernon Allen. But there are some songs I just simply don't think stack up to the others. Notably, It Must Be Love, and while Original Mix Up Kid is good, it does feel a little weak on the production department. It's kind of weird. I mean, I don't know. Just another slice of some really strong rock music from Mott. I do kind of wish that, kind of given everything, like the title of the record, the pictures and whatnot, I do wish maybe they did get a bit rootsier and maybe bring a bit of that into their sound. But overall, it's still very good. 4 stars. And they're definitely stepping away from the sort of the original Mott sound. They're starting to move towards something else that I feel like if they would have continued in this direction, it probably wouldn't have been as good as the later glam stuff, mind you, but it would have been just as interesting, if not. Regardless, 4 stars. It's very good. Wildlife.
Okay, well, I'm a little higher on that album than you are. My number five, this is another controversial placement, at least for some people. I've got All the Young Dudes from 1972, but I am up to 4.5 stars. I think this is excellent. It starts out with a very good cover of the Velvet Underground Sweet Jane. It's well sung by Ian, and there's a great guitar solo. My main complaint is that it's missing the Heavenly Wine and Roses bridge. The bridge was cut out of the song on the original Velvet Underground release, much to Lou Reed's chagrin. It wasn't restored until the Peel Slowly and See box set came out in 1995. But Mott should have known about it, hanging out with David Bowie, who was friends with Lou Reed. I would have thought they would get it right, but anyway, it's still a very good version. I just prefer the Velvet Underground version. Um, Second song, Mama's Little Jewel, is really groovy with some great piano and sax. And the title track is absolutely phenomenal. The band were amazed that Bowie was willing to give it away, but Bowie was a very generous guy, very generous with his time. He helped other people like Lou Reed and Pop in a time of his career when most other people would have been completely focused on themselves. But this song is just a jam classic, a glam classic. Um, those soaring choruses while Ian calls out to the dudes, just phenomenal. Sucker and Jerkin Crocus are very good in my opinion, but the second side I think is uniformly excellent. One of the boys kicks it off with a nearly 7 minute rocker, and it does not wear out its welcome. Soft Ground is so great and strange. Organist Verdon Allen takes lead vocals, and he sounds like a mad scientist. There's some tasty organ and really piercing guitar fills. Then you've got Ready for Love slash Afterlights, which I had known for years and years as a Bad Company song, but this is the original. Um, because of my familiarity with it, it feels a little out of place to me, and it is very different from the rest of the album. Um, as you said, it's a Mick Ralph song, and he would take it with him when he left soon afterwards to form Bad Company. Um, he takes the vocals here, and I think he does a fine job. But I do think the Bad Company one is the definitive version. Paul Rogers is just a better vocalist, and overall, the Bad Company version is just a bit more refined and powerful, I think. Nonetheless, the Mott the Hoople version is excellent in its own right. And Sea Diver is a great closing song. It's a lovely but heavy piano ballad with some very nice orchestration. Mick Ronson did the string arrangement. I love the ominous chord the piano hits after the line, "Ride on, my son, ride until you fail." Um, Speaking of Bowie and Ronson, though, I do have to mention that I love Bowie way more than Mott the Hoople. Sorry, but yeah, that's how I feel about it. Bowie's in a completely different league. But I really dig this album. I think if I grew up listening to it, I'd probably consider it a 5-star glam classic. But it's a solid 4.5 for now.
Okay, cool. I'm glad that we both have that one lower because it is ridiculously overrated. But anyways, not a bad record. I think all of these records are very strong. It's just people like that one too much. Next up for me, I own a couple of these on vinyl. I'm gonna pull them out sporadically when I have them. Next up, I'm talking about Brain Capers. This is probably the best blending of the earlier Mott sound with the later glam era, and it ends up having a bit of pros and cons. Pros is that the songs come a bit more immediately than something on, say, Mad Shadows or Wildlife. Cuts like Your Own Backyard, Darkness, Darkness, Second Love, The Moon Upstairs, all being great examples of that. The issue I do have is I feel like one of the weaker cuts on this record is actually the opener with Death May Be Your Santa Claus. And I feel like Hunter's writing is maybe a bit off compared to the sort of proto glam style that they're doing. But there are two just outstanding songs across this record. Their best epic by far being The Journey, and one of their best just straight up rock numbers, Sweet Angeline, which are right next to each other in the middle. For me, it's just sort of front to back really strong. It's just there's something there that's it's not quite 4.5. It's like just below. It's right. It's on the surface, on the cusp, if you will. It's like an 8-9, but still just have the 4 stars. But it did go up a bit more whenever I re-listened to it earlier today. Can definitely see 4.5, but at the moment, just 4 stars for Brain Capers. Very good.
All right. Well, I thought that one might be a little higher, but cool. My number 4 is Mad Shadows from 1970, their second album. Opener Thunderbuck Ram is a powerhouse, starting off rather quiet with a tasty little piano riff before launching into a scorching rock song, and then going back to mellow with the same piano figure, goes back and forth. The next two songs are very good, while Walking with a Mountain is such a joy. They do a little tribute to Jumping Jack Flash. It's a gas at the end. Um, you get songs like No Wheels to Ride, I Can Feel, and When My Mind's Gone, which really pack an emotional punch. Ian is really impressive on these songs. Um, Threads of Iron is fantastic. The beginning reminds me of Symmetry Gates by the Smiths. Was Johnny Marr listening? Maybe. uh, the song builds to a head spinning climax. It's really fantastic. Um, this is just a great rock and roll album. It's a big improvement over the debut. Ian has pretty much found his voice and is no longer imitating Dylan, in my opinion. Um, Maybe it could be 5 stars someday, but for now, I'm still at 4.5. Excellent.
Nice. I need to talk to you about Smiths after this. So we'll get to that. But anyways, I'm also at 4.5 star territory now. They have at least three genuinely great records. If I'm being honest, borderline four, with Brain Capers being like right there. Pulling out another vinyl here. One that I am surprised that you haven't talked about yet, given you talked about kind of the counterpart to this record. I'm going with the Hoople. On Mott, they were definitely showcasing more of the glam rock nature and feel to the world. The Hoople of them is diving just straight into the David Bowie bandwagon, the Mark Bolan. This is uh, pretty much next to T Rex, I think the glammiest that glam ever got. It's just incredibly bombastic and just in your face. Ian Hunter is right there, and with their new guitarist, Ariel Bender, it's just right there. And while Ariel on no levels is as good a player as Mick Ralphs, he just does what Ralphs couldn't have done. He's a much more inherent glam player as opposed to Ralph's sort of meat and potatoes bluesy rock that he was known for. And with that, I just think that he fits into this group excellently. The Golden Age of Rock and Roll is an incredible opener. And the guitar work across that song in particular is just stellar. I love the song Alice. It's really just fantastic. Crash Street Kids as well keeps some really strong momentum going. A Trudy song and Through the Looking Glass are both calmer, more tame cuts that really showcase a good contrast and a good dimension to this record, while being able to utilize some of their more softer, more intimate cuts that we were more known for doing on the earlier records. That being said, though, moving from there, Roll Away the Stone is one of my favorite closing tracks just ever. I think it's just absolutely incredible. Weirdly enough, the opening riff to it kind of reminds me of the Final Countdown by Europe. Not saying that is a bad thing, but it just kind of does. And I feel like the song is just a massive showcase of the power of the band now. As well, I just love when in that song Ian Hunter goes into a bit of spoken word, and near the middle of the song, just really excellent. And I love when Ian Hunter does spoken word just in the entire catalog because he just has such a cool voice. He just so much cool factor just permeates in everything that Ian Hunter does. And just saying that, you say that Paul Rogers is a better singer, maybe on a technical aspect, but he doesn't have an ounce of the personality that Ian Hunter does, and that's just a fact. My main struggle here is that it just simply doesn't feel like a final record, if that makes sense. Feels like this and Mott maybe should have swapped the release dates for me. Mott just feels a bit more nuanced and a bit more varied within the glam styles, while this one is a lot more direct and maybe lacks a bit of tact that I would expect from like a final record. And while to be fair, they do have the two records just titled under Mott. Nobody listens to those, so who cares? I have the 4.5 stars. I think this is a great record and one of the best in glam as a whole, which I can say about one of my top two records by them.
All right, cool. Yeah, I wasn't actually saying that Paul Rogers is a better singer than Ian Hunter. I was comparing him to Mick Ralphs, who sang Ready for Love.
Honestly, yeah, I'll still take Mick Ralphs over Paul Rogers. So
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to mislead you. I'm not a Bad Company fan by any means. That's
I kind of got that impression knowing you. They don't seem all that much up your alley.
yeah, they're not really rich core.
Uh,
um, and also, being reminded of the final countdown is definitely a bad thing, I must say.
come on, that's peak cheese right there.
Oh,
I'm not
okay,
I'm not
I'll
saying it's a
give you
great
that.
song, mind you, but it's the apex of the cheesiness of the
Oh, Jesus, you're right about that. Okay, my number three, I'm finally at Wildlife, their third album from 1971. It's a rather disjointed album, but it is loaded with 4.5 star songs and a few fives. It starts off with Whiskey Women, a very cool rocker. Um, Makes me wonder if Fleetwood Mac was listening to this one. Kind of reminds me of some stuff they've done later. Um, but the track is kind of misleading because most of the rest of the album doesn't rock like that. It's on the mellow side, most of it. There's some laid back country-ish tunes, some steel guitar, some orchestration. There's a gospel influence number in the middle there with some pounding piano. Most of the songs are mellow until you get to the last track, which is an old school blues based rocker recorded live. Not my favorite style, but this one positively smokes. And the band holds the audience in the palm of their hand. It's really good. The vocals on the album are fairly evenly divided between Ian Hunter and Mick Ralphs. And excuse me, Mick sings on the 4 songs he wrote. I especially love Ian's gorgeous Waterloo, a mellow song with fantastic strings, and also his original Mix Up Kid, which just has so much character, and the steel guitar and organ are great. Once again, I can't quite get to 5 stars on this. It's just not quite there. It's a little too disjointed, but a very strong 4.5 stars.
Nice. Yeah, I feel very similarly to how you described that record for my number two, which maybe comes as a surprise to some people, but I have Mad Shadows. To me, one of just the most underrated records of the decade. This is the longest. This is the one that took me the longest to sort of fully understand. But at this point, I just love practically every second of it. They went for a lot heavier, less Dylan inspired sound here, and you can kind of tell and see in some of the tracks the glam that they would end up on. But sorry, you can sort of tell on some of these tracks that they would end up in a bit of a glam style, but not really in Ralph's playing. The keys, per usual, for Mott are just really sensational. And like any other, oh man, my writing here is just terrible. This is really poorly written section. Anyways, let's start over. My number two is going to be Mad Shadows. This is the record that took me the longest to sort of fully understand. I'd heard this one once or twice before, and while I did love it, I had it at like a higher 4. It bumped up to 4.5 before doing this, and it's even higher than that now. This is definitely sort of the outlier in their catalog. It's not really all too similar to anything they would do later, although you can kind of see slight elements of sort of the glam, but it's very minimal in these songs. Ralph's playing is just sensational. The keys are also excellent. If I had to compare it to any other, I don't know why I wrote that. Okay, the band is just integral to elevating the songs here. A few of these songs were written and sung by Mick Ralphs, and they do have a bit of a different style and feel from the Ian Hunter ones, but the different voices always maintain the same level of quality. Tracks on here like Thunderbuck Ram, No Wheels Awry, You're One of Us, and Walking with a Mountain crush pretty much anything off that debut record. And I like the debut a good bit, but they are just not even comparable, these two records. And Mick Rouse is just able to showcase his playing better than pretty much anybody else on this record. Definitely up there for just one of my favorite guitar albums. I can just get lost in his playing all across some of these songs. And Ian Hunter, across all of these albums, tends to have like one epic, one like 6, 7+ minute song. On this one, it's I Can Feel, and this may be his best one in general. It's just outstanding. And Rouse, final track on here, Threads of Iron, just absolutely shreds and showcases everything that he's able to bring to the band. The only song that I don't love here is probably the reason why I don't quite have it at 5 stars is When My Mind's Gone. which, while good, and I like it a lot, I feel like it does leave a bit to be desired compared to the excellence that follows in the rest of the record. But to be honest, like this is so close to being 5 stars. If I double check real quickly in my 4.5s, it's right up there for being just like a top tier one. It'd be in my top 10, top 15 records that I give a 4.5 star to. It's right on the border. It just, there's something that's holding it back for me. I love it though. It's at 4.5 stars, an incredibly strong 4.5 stars, and I could not recommend it enough.
Yeah, I agree. It is great. And I Can Feel is so incredibly emotional. Almost made my top 10 list. It's at number 11. My number two, I've got Brain Capers from 1971, their fourth album, and I think it totally rocks. Um, I'm finally up to 5 stars with this one. It didn't sell well at the time, which is a damn shame. Mott were so discouraged by this point, they were ready to throw in the towel until David Bowie got involved. Every song on the first side gets 5 stars. The opener, the opener, "Death May Be Your Santa Claus," is killer. And since I heard that title, I wondered what the hell does that even mean? um, One interpretation I thought of is that maybe death is like Santa Claus because he delivers you the gift of an afterlife. Um, I don't know. The lyrics are good, but they don't really answer that question. Your Own Backyard is a sweet song about kicking drugs, how you have to start in your own backyard. Darkness, Darkness is a fantastic rocker. And I agree, The Journey is just an epic 9-minute track that goes through several changes from mellow moments to supremely rocking ones with some crushing guitar. Uh, Pretty incredible song, that one. The second side isn't quite as strong, but there's some excellent songs, some damn good rocking. The last track is essentially a short reprise of The Journey, which serves as a grand finale, but it's given the strange title. It's given the strange title, "The Wheel of the Quivering Meat Conception." Another weird one to go with "Death May Be Your Santa Claus." So, anyway, Brain Capers kicks ass, 5 stars.
Nice. Yep. I am getting into 5 star territory for me as well here. I'm rectifying your errors because I know I said a lot in the Spoon video about how your list perplexed me, but this one is a record I actually kind of give a shit about. So now I'm like really confused. Number one pretty easily for me is Mott. And for one thing, I want to say it's one of my absolute favorite just album arts in general, especially for just like an image of the band. I love this artwork. The other one where it's like the weird sort of like head thing, that one's terrible. But this one's great. To put it bluntly, I just think this record's amazing. 5 stars. It's the perfect combination of the earlier Dylan influenced songs with the glam tendencies of the band would later influence. It, it's almost like you have that sort of Dylan influence, that incredibly strong sort of folk memorabilia, but it's wrapped in this beautiful glam rock quilt or something. It just gives this group such a distinct glam sound that nobody else was doing. This isn't a record that David Bowie could make, that T Rex could make, that Slade could make. It's very unique to themselves. It starts out with maybe the best song in their catalog, All the Way from Memphis. Some absolutely sensational performance from Ian Hunter and the rest of the band as well. Wiz Kid is a ton of fun, and Him for the Dudes is just excellent as well. I love Honolulu Boogie, and Violence is just amazing. And that's the entirety of side one. If this were an EP, that's amazing. That's perfect right there. It's 10, but it's not quite there for me. both of those songs are just really in your face and really delightful. Ian Hunter, while still definitely drawing from Dylan at points, I feel like this is the record where if I was to say to anybody who's your favorite frontman of all time, I may have already alluded to this, but it is Ian Hunter, and this is the record that I could easily point to because he is just commanding this group. He is just so out in front and just pushing everything forward with his amazing performances. With that being said, Driving Sister is admittedly a bit of a step down from the previous songs, but it's still a ton of fun. And like on the rest of the record, Mick Rouse is just incredible, just all across this record. I think that this is some of his best playing. I do agree with myself earlier that Mad Shadow is the best overall display of his playing, but this is the best display of his playing as a member of the band, if that makes sense. Like this is when he best suits everything inside of the band. While on Mad Shadows, it's kind of him just showing off with how great he is as a player in and of itself. The song "Ballad of Mott the Hoople" is just incredible, and I absolutely love "I Wish I Was Your Mother" at the end. I think it's one of their more fun songs. I think that Ian's vocal performance is just once again incredible across that song. And there's not much more I could ask for in this record. To me, it's just really front to back, just really breathtaking, really excellent. If you wanted me to tell you what the peak of the glam movement is, I'd be hard pressed to tell you that there's a better record than this. It's a pretty easy 5 stars. I don't know if it's going to stay there, but at least currently it's in my top 50 records just in general. If not, it's firmly in my top 100. Absolutely incredible.
All right, my friend. Well, you make a very strong case for that. My number one is the Hoople from 1974, their seventh album and last album is Mott the Hoople before Ian Hunter left and they became Mott. And we're just ignoring everything else they did. uh, Mick Ralphs had already left and was replaced on guitar by Ariel Bender, like you said. Such a cool name. His real name is Luther Grosvenor, and he's still alive today, born in 1946. The Hoople is Mott at their glammiest, um, thanks to things like the rockin' saxes, the female background singers, and the dialogue that gives it a theatrical quality. And there's banging piano all over this album. Um, Once again, I give every song on side one 5 stars, and side two is almost as strong. Most of this album is pretty damn rockin', but then you get Trudy's song, which is a gorgeous slow rocker. And then there's Through the Looking Glass, which begins as a sweet ballad and then explodes with power. One of my favorite tracks is Pearl and Roy England, with its excellent sax and supremely catchy chorus. I didn't like that one as much when I heard it first, but it really grew on me. Just whimsical song, singing about high school hookers and shit. Just crazy. Marionette is really wild and it gets pretty intense, especially when that guitar, I think it's a guitar, that it just starts squealing. Just never heard anything quite like it. Uh, so I've got 6 of these 9 songs at 5 stars, and the other 3 aren't far behind. The Golden Age of Rock and Roll, Crash Street Kids, Born Late 58, all of them are so great. And I consider this a glam classic. Obviously, 5 stars.
I'm just kind of curious because I know that you said that you did this for TLM and another glam band that they did last year that you could argue is very comparable is T Rex, and I'm just curious, who do you prefer out of the two?
Uh, Mott. I
As you
prefer
should.
Mott.
as you should. They're both probably like top 30 bands for me in general. I love both, but I mean, Mott's like a top 10, top 15. I think they're actually just sadly my number 11. I think Roxy Music just kicks them out because they have that one more record. And to be fair, that one more record I like less than any of these, but still.
T-Rex has that boogie woogie thing and not a
Yeah, that
lot else, that's the main thing he does. And um yeah, I dig Mark Boland. He's great,
yeah,
but I'll take Mott.
as you should. As you should. But yeah, I think we've made our points rather clear. This is one of the best bands ever, in my opinion. Just really amazing music front to back. Not really a bad song in the catalog. I highly suggest you not listen to All the Young Dudes because if you're anything like me, you're going to be disappointed. And it's still a very strong record, but I mean, got better. And
Don't
I
start
don't
with
know. I'm ripping on that record a lot, but I just wish that this band got more recognition outside of that. Because I feel like even in the earlier era, they could definitely appeal to a very different demographic. I feel in the glam era, they're pretty much classic rock royalty that should be even more further appreciated than they already are. And I think it's utterly insane that Ian Hunter isn't just right on there for the Mount Rushmore of frontmen. To me, he's easily like on par with a Freddie Mercury, with like a Robert Plant. I think that he is just right up there. Just everything I want in the front man.
Yeah, I think they're definitely underappreciated. Um, I don't think many of these songs could have gotten much airplay though. They're certainly good enough.
Yeah,
Just that commercial rock radio sucks and they just play the
yeah.
same shit over and over. So I I don't think it would, a lot of them, like Golden Age of Rock and Roll is great, but I just can't imagine hearing that on Q102.
It
Um, but it's definitely great stuff, and it deserves
absolutely
to be played.
sure. I do have to echo you and agree with that. As much as I love the music and as much as they do fit into the glam scene, it's kind of hard to really. They aren't as radio ready as like T Rex or as Bowie were. They're, for lack of a better term, maybe a bit more sophisticated. I don't know if you knew this actually. I know that you mentioned Ariel Bender's age, but Ian Hunter was actually born in 1939. He's
Wow.
83, so still kicking today.
Yeah.
Crazy,
Yeah. Great.
absolutely. With that being said, though, that was the Mott episode. I apologize for the heavy sort of love fest. I know that these, at least to me, can tend to be a little bit less interesting, but I mean, hey, gotta have some fun every once in a while. Uh, that being said, not totally sure when this one's going up. This is kind of just something I'm going to throw into the schedule whenever I have time for it. So, not really having a next on. You'll see in the description below, as well. You'll see the Discord server on which you can just sort of chat, sort of say your opinions, say how wrong I am.
For
That
sure.
being said, I really hope that you enjoyed the discussion on Mott the Hoople. Hopefully, you look forward to Sushi and the Banshees whenever that comes out, and new future works. That being said, you have a great one. Bye.